Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Another family member actually threw up when she saw that.
Show cancelled. A group that sold a t-shirt making a joke about victims of a notorious serial murderer will not be performing in New Westminster.
I'm tired of people trying to normalize, abuse against women.
Plus,
graffiti in the walls, dog feces in the hallways.
a stark warning on homelessness and affordable housing in BC.
About 1,350 SROs lost by 2030 to rent increases.
What will the province do to get more people homes? And a BC nurse and her dogs get a too-close encounter with a moose.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. A New Westminster Comedy Club has cancelled an act set to take its stage after concerns were raised about some of the group's material and merchandise. Danger Cats is an Alberta-based comedy group that some people say has gone way too far by mocking Indigenous trauma, including victims of serial murderer Robert Pickton. As Liam Britton reports, families, Indigenous comedians, and even BC's Premier are calling the group out. And a warning for you, some of the material in the story may be offensive and upsetting.
A New Westminster Comedy Club has canceled a planned show that some say is offensive, including the families of victims of convicted serial killer Robert Pickton. The situation even caught the attention of the Premier.
I just really encourage this group to think carefully about this sad attempt at humor.
The group is Danger Cats, a comedy act touring across Canada and boasting a big social media presence. Some of their material has caused outcry, including using residential schools as a punchline, and the shirt they've sold making a joke out of Pickton victims. Pickton was convicted of killing 6 women, although the DNA of 33 was found on the site of his farm. Many of his victims were Indigenous. Lorelei Williams, whose cousin Tanya Holick was named as one of Pickton's victims, says the group has caused hurt and offense.
It has caused a lot of heartache and pain, especially the t-shirt referring to my cousin as a flavor. It's been horrifying. It's very disturbing.
Danger Cats were set to perform in New Westminster next month at Rick Bronson's House of Comedy. But now the show will not go on. The club issued a statement on Facebook, but it's no longer visible. That statement said it prioritized the well-being of staff, performers, and patrons, and while it values free expression, it realized the material caused discomfort, which was not the club's goal. When reached, organizers had no comment, other than the show is off. Danger Cats shows in Winnipeg were also canceled recently.
For me, I'm just tired of seeing material like this and people thinking it as if it's like art.
And some local Indigenous comedians say they're glad the show here will also not go on.
I'm tired of people trying to normalize abuse against women, violence, racism, homophobia, transphobia.
Mark agrees comedy can tackle tough subject matter, even trauma, if the approach is right.
First and foremost, trauma isn't, especially if it's not your trauma, it's not a punchline. Residential schools isn't a punchline to your joke. If you want to bring awareness to this topic and you want to do it through comedy, I think it is very possible, even if you are a white comedian, to talk about this issue from your perspective and to talk about what that all meant and how that also affected you or your community.
William says she's glad the show is canceled, but was hoping for an apology from the club.
Well, one of the words was discomfort. It caused discomfort. It's like, no, you caused harm and pain.
Danger Cats posted a statement to Instagram. They say they are canceling multiple shows in Canada and the U.S. Members say they and the venues they were meant to play have received threatening messages. As for the Pickton shirt, they say it has been removed from their store, and they're donating proceeds to Ukraine. CBC News reached out to the group, but didn't hear back right away. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Low-income and vulnerable people on Vancouver's downtown east side keep facing fewer affordable housing options. And as Belle Puri explains, the latest report by an advocacy group predicts a dramatic jump in homelessness in the next 6 years.
Housing for many who live in rundown units is simply better than nothing.
And it's depressing, graffiti in the walls, dog feces in the hallways.
That said, in coming years, Vancouver is on track to lose up to 860 modular housing units as their leases expire or new development moves in. The city already has 144 units in storage.
And even with these 39 units here, what's going to happen to them? Where are they going to go? And people could be housed in them.
As well, advocates expect hundreds of single-room occupancy units will be lost to rent increases.
Yeah, about 1,350 SROs lost by 2030 to rent increases. And there's no housing for people to go to. That's where you end up with another 10 cities.
A newly published report by the Carnegie Housing Project projects the number of unhoused people in Vancouver will hit 4,700 by 2030. The message is simple. Governments need to take steps to prevent the loss of housing. Housing that's affordable if you live on social assistance or on a pension. The report makes 42 recommendations. Among 7 priority recommendations to stop the loss of affordable housing, the report suggests governments readjust their definition of social housing.
But according to the definitions being used by provincial and federal governments, social housing might only be affordable to someone making $85,000 a year. For someone who's living in poverty, $85,000 a year is so far out of reach that it's unbelievable.
The NDP says it's reviewing a recent court decision that said the provincial government, not the city, is responsible for SRO rent controls.
Our main goal is to make sure we can get the most vulnerable people indoors, get them the supports they need. That's our focus, and we're going to continue to do that work.
Those in need of better housing have their own suggestion.
Stop building condos for the up and coming. Stop building homes that people can't afford. Start looking at, proper housing.
Advocates say by the end of the decade, governments need to create better possibilities for people on the street. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Richmond's mayor says that city will not get a supervised consumption site. Almost 2 weeks ago, City Council voted to approve a motion asking health authorities to explore the possibility of one at the city's hospital.
The resolution did not state that the city would establish a site. Council has no legal ability to do that. Only Vancouver Coastal Health can do this with the approval of Health Canada. Vancouver Coastal Health has now publicly stated it will not open a supervised consumption site in Richmond.
The motion drew 2 nights of heated protests outside City Hall by some people criticizing what they claimed was a lack of public consultation. Malcolm Brody says 26 people were killed by toxic drugs in Richmond last year, and council will continue to look for ways to keep people safe. We've been waiting for it, wondering if it's falling, and it looks like it has at least part of the day. Darius Madavi joins us now out in the elements with a first look at the weather. What's going on out there, good sir?
Well, we've got some light flurries and somebody wondering why he never gets to go outside during the nice weather when there's beautiful blue skies. But overall, not too bad. There is snow coming down, but not sticking on the ground, at least not here downtown. Up at higher elevations, up by SFU and in Coquitlam, up to 1 to 2 centimeters of snow has landed on the ground and seems to be at least sticking around for a little bit. But even if we do start to see it stick around anywhere in Vancouver, we're going to see that washed away tonight as some rain moves in. So let's start by looking at our weather watches and warnings on the graphics. You can see here a snowfall warning for much of the coast, including here in Vancouver. Probably the one place in Canada you can get a snowfall warning for less than 5 centimeters of snow. But we don't have the infrastructure, so it makes sense. In Whistler and up the Sea to Sky, we're looking at around 15 to 25 centimeters of snow by tomorrow afternoon. And don't forget, for those interior mountain passes, some winter storm warnings in place for significant snowfall and some gusty winds. Now, here on the satellite and radar, you can see those clouds moving in as well as all that snow and a little bit of rain starting in some areas. And that's going to be the story tonight. We're going to see that snow start to move out of the way and some rain take its place to wipe away all that snow that might stick around at higher elevations. But for now, that's what we're looking out for, and the morning commute shouldn't be too bad as the rain washes away the snow.
Okay, thanks very much, Darius. BC Ferries has released renderings of their new design for some new ships. Take a look. It says the new vessels will hold 600 more people and 100 more vehicles, replacing up to 6 ferries. They'll be designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by using bio and renewable fuels, and will include a battery hybrid propulsion system that will allow them to convert to electric in the future. The plan is for the new vessels to hit the waters in 2029. It is an apology decades in the making. The BC government has now officially acknowledged historical wrongs on a little-known group of exiled Russians. 70 years ago, government officials forcibly removed some 200 Doukhobor children from their homes. Lindsay Duncombe has more on the apology and the compensation deal that some say is not enough.
There is healing in these Russian songs, a way for Betty Kabatov to acknowledge what was taken from her.
They wouldn't let us speak Russian. I got strapped every time I did.
She was just 8 years old when a police officer took her from her bed, forced to spend 4.5 years here at a former tuberculosis sanitarium with 200 other Doukhobor children, members of a group known as the Sons of Freedom, Russian Christian pacifists who lived communally and clashed with the government.
And they tried to knock the Doukhoborism out of me.
Their parents visited twice a month, families separated by a chain-link fence.
Today, on behalf of the province of British Columbia, we acknowledge and apologize for these past injustices.
This apology comes after decades of lobbying by survivors.
Where children paid the price for the conflicts of adults.
The Sons of Freedom were known for nude protests and setting their homes on fire in a rejection of materialism. This retired law professor says lingering distrust of Doukhobors likely delayed reconciliation.
I suspect if you tried to do it in the 80s or 90s, there might have been opposition in the Kootenays and that part of British Columbia.
The apology comes with $10 million in compensation, much of it for education. $3.75 million will go to a fund for survivors. Not good enough, says Kabatov.
We all deserve personal compensation.
Her niece confronted the premier about how the money will be spent.
Maybe the voice that was taken away from them 71 years ago can actually now be heard by you. Would you commit that to us, Mr. Premier?
Absolutely. We'll work with you to make this right.
Work the survivors hope will happen soon, given how long they have suffered. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Victoria.
The federal government has now settled a claim with the Matsqui First Nation in the Fraser Valley. It will receive almost $60 million for the historic loss of reserve land that was given to the Vancouver Power Company, now known as BC Hydro, in 1908.
It will help our nation with its goals of delivering on the wishes of our citizens. And for the individual Matsqui members, it will mean a financial break.
Matsqui filed the claim in 2010 and began negotiating with Ottawa in 2017 ahead of this year's settlement. A BC lawyer has now been ordered to pay for citing fake cases that were created by ChatGPT. The cases would have provided compelling precedent for a divorced dad to take his children to China had they been real. Our Jason Proctor breaks down what happened.
So, Jason, what happened here with the lawyer?
Okay, so it comes in the context of this divorce case between a multimillionaire and his ex-wife. And so in an application to have his children travel to China that was put into the court last December, his lawyer filed this brief, basically, that relied on 2 cases, both in which mothers were able to take their children out of town, out of country, which, would sound good. But once his ex-wife's lawyers started looking into it, they were like, well, we can't find these cases anywhere. So they asked his lawyer, hey, can you provide us with copies of these cases? According to the documents that I've seen, she goes, looks into it, realizes these cases don't exist. They were, invented by ChatGPT. Which apparently she'd used to help her put together this application. According to these court documents, she wants to withdraw the cases and doesn't ultimately rely on them in making her argument, but it still becomes a thing before the court because this application went before the court at some point. And, the judge says this is super concerning because, it has happened once that we know of in the United States involving a lawyer who, ended up begging for mercy from a court. And, it's just a concerning thing here.
So what else did the judge say about this?
Well, so basically, the lawyer for the ex-wife wanted special costs, which is for reprehensible misconduct by a lawyer against this woman. The judge in the case said, I don't think she actually tried to deceive anybody, and she was apparently mortified by the fact that the whole kind of issue came out and it's made headlines now. But the judge has said that she should have to pay for the time that the ex-wife's lawyers had to take in order to figure out that they were fake. And he's also said, you need to go through all of your cases and figure out if there's any other fakes.
No, super interesting case. Thank you so much, Jason.
And a report shows costs for Toronto to host its 2026 World Cup matches have jumped from close to $45 million to $380 million. Vancouver is hosting 7 games, and it's unclear how much those will cost the city. The BC government insists the games will boost Vancouver's economy, though.
We're going to have a lot more visitors here, so the revenues that we're going to make from these games have gone up substantially. About $1 billion in economic activity. We have about over 300,000 people coming during the matches.
Popham says Vancouver's final costs for hosting those games ought to be available soon. The federal government is reacting to a new CBC investigation, saying provinces need to take responsibility for the nationwide spike in international students. Politicians say it's a handful of private schools fueling the influx. But as Valerie Ouellette shows us, it's actually public colleges, most of them in Ontario, getting the most study permits.
More than 2,000 international students from over 60 countries worldwide.
That was 2017. Now that number has more than tripled at this public college in southwestern Ontario. One of them is Shabnoor Abdulatif, who's just 2 months away from completing her postgraduate certificate in healthcare administration management. At 34, she came to Canada to start a new life, giving up her career as a certified physician in Iran.
Since I'm a vocal person, it was not a safe place for me.
Abdulatif is aware of the scrutiny being placed on her and her fellow international students.
I also feel that there's a lot of us here, and without housing, without healthcare, I can totally understand that, but is it all on us?
No one should be blaming the students, of course. I mean, clear as day by the data, the issue is the schools themselves that are bringing them in.
That data, obtained and analyzed by CBC News, shows that what has been framed as a national crisis is in fact driven by a handful of colleges and universities. Out of the 10 with the greatest increases in study permits, 9 of them are public schools in Ontario.
It's not double or triple. We're talking 30 times more students.
This student advocate calls increases like these reckless.
They knew there was already a housing shortage problem, and that's how public colleges in Ontario responded, by trying to get as many as they could through the door before the door got slammed.
We show Abdulatif how much permits have increased in those handful of Ontario schools.
And Algoma is 40 times more.
Wow. Are they even prepared for this much students? It feels like schools are not there to help us, but to get our money.
We reached out to the top 10 schools with the highest increases. 7 replied. One school explained it doesn't control the number of study permits approved. That's on Ottawa. Almost all mentioned decreases in provincial funding and domestic enrollment.
Valerie Ouellette reporting. Are you able to give with the deadline for RRSP contribution upon us? How many Canadians are actually putting money away, and when's the right time to start saving? We'll look for some answers after the break. And hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. Thanks for being here. A man experiencing homelessness in Charlottetown is sharing his story. David Turner has been homeless since September. He was evicted for being late on his rent and just spent his 75th birthday with no fixed address. Turner says more services are needed. Here's more of his story.
It's very hard on a 75-year-old. It's very depressing. I have had to use the walk-in mental health clinics at various times. I could not partake of seniors housing because my pension, which I earned very hardly, is over the cutoff limit. For the first, I don't know, month and a half or so, from mid-September, September the 8th or whatever, I slept in my SUV. When the weather turned cold, about mid-November or so, I went to Bedford McDonald House on whatever street and was received quite well. That's a 10-person shelter. I stayed there until I timed out 2 days before Christmas when I was put out on the street. I was lucky enough to get into Park Street Shelter. Clients that use Park Street Shelter have substance abuse issues. It can be very, very nerving. People have reported that things have been stolen from their possessions. The staff generally at Park Street are, good people, and they try to do what they can. When I returned to Bedford McDonald House from Park Street, there was mail there for my two grandchildren in Halifax, and there was a Tim's card in there and pictures of my grandkids, and that brought tears to my eyes. But I got that. It was supposed to be for Christmas, but I got it, and I called it my birthday present. I'm struggling. I have seen a few units. Money is the big issue right now until I get my pensions at the end of the month. So, I'm working at it. I partake of the Salvation Army breakfast program on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and that's tremendous. And I've received fantastic help from a lady a little younger than me at the outreach center. The housing situation is in crisis. The apartment situation is really, really desperate. People are struggling.
BC is certainly not alone in Canada facing a mounting toxic drug crisis. Alberta saw a record number of people killed by toxic drugs in 2023. Over the border, the government there, though, is taking a very different approach to the crisis, focusing on treatment and recovery as the solution. The National's Ian Hannah-Mansing spent time in Alberta looking at how their model works and hearing from people on various sides.
So the pharmacy has your medication, it's all ready to go. You have to do 1 witness dose, but you'll be given 6 carries, okay?
This isn't your average call center. The people on the other end of the line are desperate for help.
It sounds like he's been having multiple overdoses that are documented.
For Albertans seeking help, this call center is open 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. Addiction counselors, social workers, and nurses assess each person to see how they can help them to stop using drugs.
So then you don't feel the need to use, you know what I mean? Which is exactly what Suboxone should do for you, and Sublocade as well, as long as you're on the right dose, right?
Is there another room like this elsewhere in the country? This is the only program I know of like this. It's based right here in central Alberta in Ponoka.
Alberta's Minister of Mental Health and Addiction, Dan Williams, took us for a tour. He says people from anywhere in the province, from big cities to remote rural communities, can get help.
We're treating thousands of Albertans every year, and they get that immediate same-day access to evidence-based medication that brings relief to them, and it allows those people who had an opioid addiction to have a gasp of air and lift out of their addiction for a moment. And we hope, and it seems to be, this is the start of their journey on recovery.
On average, the staff here connect about 19 people a day to a doctor who can prescribe Suboxone, which eases withdrawal symptoms, or methadone, an opioid used to ease addictions. Dr. Nathaniel Day is the center's medical director.
The reality is then we will shoot that prescription directly to the pharmacy that you've chosen closest to where you live or work. And then you'll be able to go into the pharmacy, see the pharmacist, and start treatment today.
Any idea of long-term outcomes for them?
The fact of the matter is we see drug use go way down over time with the patients that we care for, and we see overdoses go way down over time. It's like a hockey stick.
Dr. Day was one of the authors of a study that concluded 90% of the people in this program have remained in treatment for 6 months. After 12 months, that number drops to 58%.
That call center in Pinoca and this treatment facility in Red Deer are two examples of what the provincial government calls the Alberta model, focusing on treatment and recovery as the best way to tackle the drug crisis.
So this is the gathering space. This is where our main community meetings happen.
With its airy public spaces, from a gleaming gym to a theater room, this addiction treatment center feels less like a health institution and more like a nice motel.
So we have single occupancy and double occupancy rooms.
Yeah.
And being able to get into a single occupancy room is one of these things that you move along in the process.
Opened 9 months ago, up to 75 men and women can stay here at no cost to them. This is one of 2 new publicly funded addiction treatment centers in Alberta. The other is in Lethbridge. In all, the province plans to build a total of 11 over the next 3 years. In total, they could treat more than 2,000 people a year. The government says it's added 10,000 treatment spaces since 2019.
I almost lost custody of my children, and I was able to do intake through a phone and call.
The facility arranged for us to speak with 3 residents. Given the stigma around addiction, we agreed not to show their faces.
And how long did you have to wait between the time you made the call and you could walk through the door?
Only about a week,
yeah.
Which is unheard of, really. Usually waiting lists are months and months.
The government says wait times are always changing, but when people get into this center, they can get treatment for up to a year.
The connections that I've made is huge, right? When you have the short-term programs, it's easy just to fall back into the same people, the same crowd.
You're 8 months here. How do you feel about your prospects after you leave here?
I just know that if I do the things I need to do here and bring them into my life when I leave, I have a very good chance of succeeding.
But addiction is often a lifetime struggle. Will more treatment spaces in Alberta significantly reduce the number of people taking illicit drugs?
What data do you have on the Alberta model? Is it too early? Do you have numbers that say that the Alberta approach is actually making things better?
So the data is that we see 10,000 new spaces, almost all of which is full in Alberta, and we see thousands of lives of people who otherwise would have been through addiction that are now living in recovery.
The government concedes it doesn't yet have the data on the impact of the Alberta model, but Williams makes it clear. He believes treatment is the solution to the toxic drug crisis.
The only way out of this is if at a large scale, a government comes in and says, we know that recovery is a path off of addiction. If you don't build a very expensive and sophisticated system around recovery, of course you're going to continue to see more deaths.
But for all the optimism about access to treatment, a grim number hangs over the province. 1,706 people in Alberta died from illicit drug poisonings in the first 11 months of 2023, the most recent number available. That's more than 5 Albertans every day. Lives which many experts say won't be saved by making addiction treatment the focus.
You must find all of this very frustrating.
Yeah, I think like to be focused so much on preserving what we have and to not expanding or trying new things, it is extremely frustrating. And like I said, the statistics really show that we're not doing enough.
Elaine Hishka is a professor at the University of Alberta whose research focuses on the public health approach to substance abuse.
Alberta is boldly focusing on treatment. Do they have it right?
I don't think anyone that says there's one solution to the problem of drug poisoning has it correct. And if you look at our statistics, the numbers speak for themselves. We are on track to lose potentially over 2,000 people this year, more people than we've ever lost in Alberta. And so I don't think our current policy approach is working. And I think evidence-based public health approach would include not just effective treatment, but also harm reduction. We are not taking that comprehensive approach, and I think we're seeing the results.
Harm reduction is one of the pillars of British Columbia's response to the drug crisis, including supervised areas to take drugs and providing to some a so-called safer supply of uncontaminated drugs. BC believes that approach can save lives. Alberta's United Conservative Party is adamantly opposed to safer supply, saying it facilitates drug use and ultimately drug deaths. At the party's annual general meeting last November, members voted to end provincial funding of supervised consumption sites. It's not binding, but it does reflect how the UCP feels about harm reduction.
Do you think politics is what's driving the approach of the government here?
Yes, yeah. I mean, politics drives the approach of all governments to some extent, but I think in the last few years in Alberta, we have seen a lot more politicization of the issues.
The best thing that we could do is bring people indoors to safe sites.
In Edmonton, outreach groups, independent of government, are trying to fill the gaps.
We want to encourage everybody, if you don't have an naloxone kit with you, do you want to take one?
Chanel Twan invited us to join her team as they walked the downtown streets.
Okay, so there's foil, push stick, water, cookers, sharps, pretty much everything you're gonna need.
They're focused on what people who use drugs need right now to stay alive.
And do you need anything else? Straight shooter kit, rig kit, naloxone, straight shooter kit?
Those kits contain clean pipes to smoke drugs. They also hand out naloxone or Narcan, which can be injected to revive someone poisoned by drugs.
So we're going to put the tip of the needle now in the bottom of the juice, and we're going to suck it up. So I'm going to let you do it. Okay, you want to take that? You can point it down. In 2016, we lost 353 people here in Alberta, and so that's almost one a day. Now here in Alberta in 2024, we're losing 5 people a day. We know the numbers are a little bit more dire in British Columbia, but it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And we're out here literally with naloxone, trying to put naloxone on bullet holes.
In Edmonton, like many cities in Canada, drug use is sometimes very public and deeply disturbing.
On top of having supplies, can we get everybody some naloxone?
And in the age of fentanyl, one hit can be deadly.
Will more treatment help address this?
Immediately, if we're talking about bringing people indoors and saving lives, tomorrow, it's safe consumption sites and safe supply that are going to save lives.
But I think the government here in this province would say increasing access to treatment, increasing treatment facilities is the answer.
I would tell those government officials and I would invite them to come and have a walkabout like you're doing today, and hopefully maybe that will help them open their hearts and minds to the reality that folks are actually dealing with out here.
You brought some pictures of Lakota, and I just wonder if you can tell me what memories they bring to mind.
He was so handsome.
Yeah.
He was a really handsome kid.
Every death from drugs has a story. And U of A assistant professor Sarah Auger wanted to tell us the story of her son, Lakota, who died just before Christmas of 2022.
This is actually probably my favorite picture of him. He's with his daughter.
He was a father, a loving son. He was also a binge drinker who sometimes used drugs. Auger believed Lakota needed to hit rock bottom to turn his life around. She was wrong.
The rhetoric around abstinence and sobriety and recovery and all that is you have to hit rock bottom, and as a parent, you've got to practice tough love. Sometimes rock bottom kills, often right now in
you know, in the province and the country today, rock bottom kills.
Lakota lost his apartment and moved in with his mom. But when he started using again, she said he had to leave. She believed the answer to her son's demons was to just stop using alcohol and drugs.
That was my focus with him. Just get him sober and he'd be okay. There are so many things I know today that if I had known differently then, I would have absolutely approached his use differently.
What would have saved his life?
Options. Options. If he had known about harm reduction measures, would he have used them? The answer is I don't know. But he should have had the option presented to him, because I do believe he wanted to live.
Lakota is part of that tragic statistic, the growing number of Albertans killed by toxic, illicit drugs. I asked Alberta's Minister of Mental Health and Addiction if these deaths prove his government's approach to the drug crisis is too narrow, that it should include supplying access to a so-called safer supply.
Do you need to be adding another part to this approach that says, yes, treatment, yes, recovery, yes, some version of harm reduction, but even more because we're clearly not reaching those 5 people a day?
What has brought us to this crisis is the exact logic and reason that they say we need to double down on. Safe supply will not solve the problem. There's no...
But it'll keep people alive, won't it?
It will not. Safe supply will facilitate more addiction. I don't believe safe supply in the least is any version of harm reduction. What I say to Canadians watching this unfold on both sides is we have a choice in front of us. There are clear lines drawn. Is it that handing drugs out to drug addicts and the model of harm reduction that it's become is the path forward? Or is it going to be investing heavily in recovery so we don't see any more of those scenes on the street that you saw yesterday?
These folks are all people that come from our community, that we love, that we had relationships, that are no longer here, that we miss.
After Chanel Tuan took us on a tour of those streets, there was one more thing she wanted to show us. Every one of these faces, each card, is from a funeral or memorial she's been to.
We don't have enough room to show you who all our friends are, but all of our friends are gone. And
every card, a son, daughter, in many cases a father or mother, most of them killed by poison drugs.
We will continue to keep showing up in light of inaction, and we will continue to keep filling these gaps as we see them. But we don't want to see anybody else's loved ones added to this pile. We would obviously tell Canadians, please don't wait to give a shit about other people until it's somebody that you're connected to somebody that you love.
Whatever the solution, each one is a reminder of the overwhelming loss. With no sign, the crisis is easing.
The CBC's Ian Henemansing reporting from Alberta. Are you able to give? The RRSP contribution deadline is approaching. How many Canadians are actually putting money away, and when's the right time to start saving? We're going to get some answers for you after this.
Once you step between those ropes, it's mano a mano. I get into that zone where you don't see nothing else, it's just the guy that you're fighting. I got into fighting because of, some dumb stuff when I was younger, just street fighting. And that's the thing, ever since I actually got, some skills with boxing, I was like, you know what? I would like to see how I legit actually fight. I wonder how my hands would actually be with no gloves.
Straight right hands. We have the BKFC Prospect Series coming. It's the largest bare knuckle platform in the world right now. We had the tryouts for this fight card at our gym, and 3 of our guys were picked to showcase what they got in the bare knuckle ring, and it's showtime.
And drop. Let's go.
Bare knuckle, it's the rawest combat sport there is out there right now, you know. You can't box like it's boxing because it's not boxing, you know. You can put your guard up, the glove will cover most of your face. Well, your hands don't cover as much as the glove, so there's a lot of things that are different in the bare knuckle sport that, you know, guys will just have to get used to when they get in their first fight.
People look at it like it's barbaric and stuff, no gloves, but man, I feel in this, like, you have to be so smart with it, because, you know, you can mess yourself up pretty bad too, just hitting somebody.
A lot of fighters who come into our gym were really in the, like, you know, not the best part of Edmonton, really. You got a lot of characters, a lot of broken home kids, and a lot of kids with no dreams, and they come and we help them to, you know, reach their dream. And I think, like, this is so good for a lot of fighters, even though normal audience might think this is barbaric, but you gotta understand this is the way of living for a lot of people in a controlled, safe environment where they get paid to do this. You know, it keeps a lot of people off the street, you know, so it gives them a purpose to work towards. Martial arts and fighting, combat sports have changed my life to a better, and like I've coached over 100 kids, and all of them doing a lot better now. Even some of them, they don't fight anymore, they have a better job, they're keeping their job, they have purpose now. And martial arts and combat sports saves life.
My mom was like, why are you doing this? But like I said this like for a long time where it's like, you know, it's a dream. Right, and to be under the bright lights and have an opportunity to be on a platform this big, I'm always the person to just like, you know, if something comes to your door, you gotta take it, right? And this promotion's coming to my city, then I might as well put on for my city.
1, 2, 3, red!
The deadline to contribute to an RRSP for this year is February 29th. But if last year was any indicator, more and more Canadians are struggling to put money away. Earlier this month, the Bank of Montreal released its annual retirement survey. It found the amount of money held in RRSPs dropped by 28% in 2023. Margaret Leong is a senior investment counselor and portfolio manager at BMO. She joins us now to explain what this means. Margaret, thanks for joining us. First of all, why do you think you're seeing that drop?
Well, thanks for having me tonight. Thank you so much. I think the retirement survey results were really interesting, even though I was not directly involved in the survey. And we don't know exactly why there's a big drop in those numbers. But despite the decline, one thing to note is that the total account holding are actually in line with the historical averages. And it's just with a very notable increase of the retirement saving during the COVID-19 pandemic time. And I think this result does not necessarily mean that people are actually withdrawing money from the RSP, because typically that means it has a fairly negative tax consequences. So based on my observation, I think there could potentially be two factors. One is the pandemic effect, of course. During the pandemic, we have nowhere to go, no restaurant, no entertainment. So, you know, we're sort of cooped up at home and we have a lot of money to save. So after the pandemic, what we're seeing is the economy reopened in 2022, and we experienced a couple of really important phenomena. One is supply chain shock. We have war in Ukraine. We had labor shortage and significant increase in consumer spending. So all that actually drove the inflation up to nearly 9% at one point. So we're seeing cost of living going up while our income level stay level. A lot of us have to dip into savings or even, you know, cut down on our saving into RSP. So I think this is one of the reasons that contribute to this drop of number. And the second one is a market effect. A lot of us could remember that back in 2021-22, the market actually has a very good uptick. But in the first quarter of 2022, when the central bank start hiking rate from near zero to up to 5%, what we're seeing is the debt and equity market had a severe drop in value. So the survey was actually conducted in November 2023. So this number may have a lagging effect. So the good news is that if we're resurveying these numbers today, it could look a lot better.
Yeah. Saving money can feel overwhelming for many people. We know cost of living and inflation has bitten to a lot of people's incomes, especially people struggling to afford basic needs. What's your advice for them on a real micro level?
So I think what's really important, and of course I'm observing this from a lot of my clients, I've been in the industry for 28 years, it is really important to start out a plan because different people have different needs. We have a lot of tax shelter plan from the government. RSP is actually one of them, but there are other ones such as TFSA, First Home Savings Plan and RESP and whatnot. Not everybody necessarily need to buy RSP, and it really boils down to the planning. So the smarter way to do this is probably seek professional advice to check your tax bracket to see if these RSP contribution even will result in any tax advantage. For example, people who are starting out with low income tax bracket, the contribution to RSP may not produce a very significant tax benefit. Instead, maybe look into contribute into TFSA, which is another tax shelter vehicle that allows you to redeem and use it as an emergency fund. There's no penalty when you redeem the fund, so there's no tax consequences. Whereas
Margaret, I apologize for interrupting. We're right out of time. Margaret Leong, Senior Investment Counselor and Portfolio Manager at BMO. Thank you for your time and your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Good night.
A stroll in the snow turned mildly terrifying. We'll show you a close encounter between two dogs, a woman, and a moose when we come back.
Phenomenal results. This had surpassed even our wildest expectations. It sold for $3.72 million. I think we had a pre-auction estimate of $2 million. I was thinking it might sell for around $3 million, but 3.72 million is something that is very rarely seen in this industry. It's one of the highest priced items ever sold at Heritage, and it's certainly the highest price sold unopened item in the sports collectibles market. Around 12 to 15 unique bidders. I'd have to look to see exactly how many bids were placed, but at the very end in the final stretch, there was just two guys going at it. Once it got past that 2.5 million mark, once it started to get close to 3 million, then it was really these two guys who wanted it badly. The family is ecstatic. I could imagine at some point the buyer will sell individual boxes of this case to collectors, and if that happens, then it's very possible that some of these will be opened. You're not going to have someone open a $4 million box of cards, but if you break it down to $250,000 boxes, those individual boxes might circulate and eventually be opened. In addition to this 79 O-Pee-Chee hockey case, there was a 77 case of baseball, 78 baseball case, 79, and other boxes in the mid to late 70s into the early 80s. I bet you a couple of those baseball cases should get into the six figures. You should see still some $200,000-$300,000 items, I would imagine. Some of these boxes, there were maybe 100 boxes, unopened boxes of various cards. And some of them were $1,000 boxes and some of them were $10,000 boxes. And in addition to that, we filled up a van of singles, of sets, of material that it was an entire collection of lifetime's work of cards that were just sitting in this house. So all told, there's still, I'd imagine, 7 figures worth of items to be sold, but the top prize was that Gretzky case, which we also saw sold. If you take out the Wayne Gretzky case, that $3.7 million case, it's still the most significant find of Canadian cards we have seen in the past 20 years.
A BC travel nurse in the Yukon recently had a terrifying encounter while walking two dogs. She was videoing one of the animals enjoying the snow when another creature showed up.
I took these two dogs and we were just out for a walk, and I had my phone out because the dog was jumping. There's lots of snow, so he's jumping like a rabbit. I thought it was cute, so I was filming him. And then he started barking up a tree, so I figured there was a squirrel. And next thing I knew, I heard this big loud, like a horse. And I looked up and there was a giant moose standing there, and I already had my phone out. So I was like, oh, cute, like I'll take a video. And next thing I knew, he was like running towards us. Don't even know what happened after that, but the moose ran away. So I was pretty scared. It all happened so fast. And then all of a sudden it was over. And I was like, did that just happen? Like he came so close to me, but yeah, it happened.
Sure did. They don't look real. They look like something Jim Henson invented.
They're so
It's a
big.
Muppet horse. Oh my God, they're amazing.
Every time before I see them.
Yeah. There's a good reminder for you, folks.
Yes. Well, if you also want to test your luck with getting a moose to come eat your dogs, which I don't recommend, you can get your dogs to jump around in the snow too if you're in the interior. On the south coast, not really too much snow sticking around for the most part today. We do have, on some parts of the island at higher elevations, a little bit. Once again, Coquitlam, the Tri-Cities, some places at higher elevations, seeing a little bit of snow stick around. But for the most part, as we see this rain move in by midnight tonight, we're going to see that snow get washed away. Now, if we zoom out to the rest of the province, there is plenty of activity still happening because at higher elevations, lots of snow building up, especially on those mountain passes. So you should be careful if you're planning to do any traveling in the interior over the next couple days, because by Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, there should be some significant accumulation across many of these areas, including on some of the mountains in the lower mainland and really across the province, which is a little bit of good news in terms of the snowpack and drought situation. If we zoom in, you can see plenty of accumulation in many of these areas, but not much in the across the Metro Vancouver area. So not too much to worry about in terms of the commute tomorrow morning, especially as that rain comes in and washes it out. Although there is a chance of some freezing rain in the valley for a short time tonight. So if you're doing any overnight driving, be aware of that. But again, should be cleared up by the morning as the temperatures rise. But also, in terms of the rain, it could be heavy in many areas over the next 48 hours as that does move in and wipe out the snow. So that's also a concern for some people when they're going to be driving over the next couple days. So just be aware. Again, lots of snow in the local mountains. And in terms of conditions across the province, we have a little bit of activity or a lot of activity happening across the province, including here in Vancouver over the next few days. Very rainy forecast ahead.
And you're indoors, so that's nice too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some would say it's one of Vancouver's best summer jobs, driving the False Creek ferries. After the break, our Caroline Chen heads out onto the water to see what it takes. Stick around. Have you ever wondered who pilots the False Creek ferries?
Well, they are looking for candidates for the upcoming busy season, and our Caroline Chen went to see if she has what it takes.
Have you ever driven a boat before?
No.
Oh.
I paddle.
Well, there you go.
But I think it's a little different.
Not much.
Hi, I'm Caroline, skipper in training.
Hi, Caroline. I'm Lowenball. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Falls Creek Ferries. How are you today?
I'm doing well.
I hear you want to come down and learn how to drive a boat.
I do.
All right. Well, step into the office.
Thank you. Oh, where should I go?
So, oh no, this is your seat right
This
up
is
here.
my seat.
This is your seat. So this is the steering wheel, the throttle. You've got our VHF radio up there. You've got all our navigation lights up there. And why don't we take it for a spin?
For real?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh. Okay.
It's alive.
It's alive.
Yeah. All right, we're ready to take off. It's just like driving a car. Do you have your driver's license?
Yes.
All right. Don't worry, I won't let you crash.
Okay.
Let's just get out of the other ferry's way here. You can see that it's a pretty busy harbor. There's lots of things to pay attention to. There's other boats, there's other ferries. There's paddlers, there's kayaks, there's rental boats, there's dragon boats, there's outriggers, there's speed boats, you name it. So we always have to keep our head on a swivel. Take the wheel.
Okay.
Skipper in training,
So if we
Caroline
go,
Chen.
let's go left.
Yeah.
I'm driving a boat.
You're driving the Falls Creek Ferry.
This is awesome. So how long do you have to train before you get to actually take passengers?
So before we even hire anyone, we look for boating experience or competency. Once you're hired, we do 6 days of on-the-water training. And it just takes practice, like anything. And feel free to steer. You're driving. I'm just supervising here. You go where you want to go.
You have a lot of faith in me.
Well, it's nice to have faith in humanity. It's kind of what this job has taught me, is that people are pretty much good and nice overall.
Well, this is a very nice office.
I like it. I'd rather do this than work behind a desk. Hey, Tootsie the Dave, can you give us a wave as you go by here?
Sure. Also, Kai was trying to get a hold of him.
There's a lot of details to this job that people might not expect, right? It's a bit of an unusual job. Do you want to do a ballet move?
Like now?
Yeah, right now.
Okay.
Okay, ready?
Okay.
So I need you to push down on the throttle a little bit more, and then I need you to crank the wheel all the way over to the left. Go, 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 as fast as you can. Now, it's more impressive with more than one boat, but it's still a donut. And then you have to give the shave and a haircut on the horn. Even on the calm days, you do need to pay attention to the wind and the weather. These boats are quite tall, so the wind affects them a lot. So if you're not careful, you'll get blown around. I think a lot of people can attest to the desire to be on the water. It's just a nice place to be, and it's like a little break. It's a little meditative. It's calm. You get your boating fix in without having to own a boat. And start turning to the left. I'm going to talk you through landing. Promise I won't let you crash. Pull the throttle back until it clicks, just like that. And now you can start turning to the left just a little bit, not too much. And now I want you to pull the throttle till it's straight up and backwards. You did it. You're hired.
Yay!
Captain Chan, nicely done. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch our newscast on CBC Gem, the free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
We'll have your next local news and snow update at 11 o'clock right after the National. Good night.